Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session. It's Wednesday, December 1st, 2021. It is 11:03 a.m. My name is Ty Metzer, Chair of the Board. Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards to my left, Commissioner Carolina Mejia to my right, County Manager Amira Chavez. This meeting is live streamed on our YouTube channel, just so everybody's aware of that. It's just part of our kind of COVID-19 adaptations to our public meetings and public access. So we have an hour, and the topic for this work session is applicant interviews for Timberland Regional Library Board of Trustees. And we have two applicants. We're going to spend maybe 25 minutes per applicant, I believe. And first up is Carly Schiffner. And thank you for being here. County Manager, anything else you'd want to say by way of preamble?
No, Carly, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you perfectly now. Thank you.
I need to just let you know I've lost my voice, so
Okay.
I might sound like I'm on mute, just so I apologize. I will work to be as loud as possible.
So just what should we be expecting today? 30 minutes, as Commissioner Mason stated. We don't have pre-planned questions. This is more an opportunity for the commissioners to get to know you. A little bit more what you stated on your applications, because I believe that this appointment is very important. And obviously you have an impressive set of resumes and activities in your application. So relax. This is a very informal conversation with you. So I believe the commission is going to take some turns asking you some questions and maybe a follow-up to that as well. And there you go.
Great. Thank you so much for being so welcoming. Appreciate it.
All right. Anybody want to start, or you want me to start? How about I just throw out the kind of obvious question of what makes you want to serve on as a trustee on our board, regional library board?
Great. Thank you so much for the question. Well, one, recently became, 3.5 years ago, became a resident of Thurston County, and have been a long time resident of either Washington State or New York State, and have worked in higher ed for the duration of my career. But at every step of my career at different places that I've lived and served, I've always been connected to the public library. So for personal use, for work, integration with my community and technical college portfolio or what have you, but also as a patron growing up in the Northwest and having very much a connection with the library on a personal note. I wrote in my application about my background and the struggle of literacy that has been part of my family history, and to really work as I'm proud of being a living example of working through the power of literacy and education. And so I believe that the public library system is a huge part of that, and democratizing access to information. And all of this, of course, you can tell I'm a little bit older. So my growing up did not have the internet. Phones were still connected to the wall, and card catalogs were not online, but something you flip through. So very much have seen the progress of our public library system, and that has also been something that has intrigued me to see where we can also take libraries just outside of kind of those boxes that perhaps we've grown up with and our stereotypes of libraries and so forth. So for all of that, personally and professionally, very excited to be thinking of how I could utilize my leadership skills from my day job into giving back to my community here in Olympia.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me. I'm so sorry that I'm raspy. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Carly, it's always great to see another Centennial mom. But my question for you is, can you give us an example of a time where you've, navigated through a very difficult, high conflict situation?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I know I only have 25 minutes. I'm happy to mention several, but I will narrow it down to one or two. When I was invited to be the university provost in New York, I moved from Yakima Valley Community College and transitioned to a leadership role in higher ed in New York State. The month that I got there and started my new position, the chancellor for the system came out with an announcement that encouraged a plan of shared services. And the shared services plan included consolidating some of the 64 independent universities in that system. 6 of those universities in that system, one of which was one that I had just moved and uprooted my family, my one daughter at the time and my husband and I from our home state of Washington to New York, only to find out that my job might be in jeopardy. So my position, was in question whether or not I was going to be able to keep my university provost position, because the university president that I went to go work for had been fired by the chancellor after that announcement. And so for the next 6 months, we navigated a lot of I will say lots of strata of political layers, public, private, community, town gown, relations, lots of emotions, everything from, who's going to lead this college to what's the new mascot going to be if we merge with a neighboring university. I mean, everything in the gamut. So I really worked very hard in that situation to continue to put open and honest conversations forward, to provide opportunities to have open dialogue with the community constituents that I worked with there in that community, as well as with the internal employee base at the university. A lot of these individuals, it was a remote, we joked, it was just south of the Arctic Circle, very small community in upstate New York, that a lot of people had worked their entire lives at the university or had been in that community and had long ties to the university and were alum. And so we managed through those emotions as well with that identity. I would say that what ended up happening is that there was a very public decision that was made not to merge the colleges. But the challenge was that there was a lot of damage that was done. And so one of the things that happened is that the chancellor ended up appointing me as the interim president, because I had helped to maintain, because I had worked with that university before, helped to maintain some stability and to help work with, all of the different stakeholders to try to make sure that we were not tearing each other apart, that our students weren't being hurt, and our community was going to continue to thrive regardless of this political impact from someone we would say that was from Albany, which was 4 hours away, who didn't really understand our community. So I would say that would be one of the more severe cases of conflict in the workplace that I've worked to manage through. And I would say, if I was to answer probably part B of that question, thinking about how to do things differently, I think I would have done a lot of the things similarly. But I think at that time I was also 37 and 7 months pregnant with my second baby. And I would probably have been a little bit more bold earlier in my conversations with some of the decisions I made. So in reflection, a lot of similar decisions, but also probably I would have been a little bit more empowered to make those decisions earlier. I hope that, I'm sorry, that as a historian, I'm also a storyteller, so I apologize for the run-on story there.
You got one, Commissioner?
I could ask a question maybe as a follow-up, and I don't know if it would apply to the situation that you just laid out, but could you give me an example of a situation that you had to do the right thing, even though maybe it wasn't the popular thing?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, there's a couple. I have some stories for you at a different time, probably, that would be funny over a glass of wine, but not appropriate for today. But I will say, one of the things that comes to mind was working at a educational institution where there was a lot of challenges with town-gown relations. And one of the concerns was that we had students that were not from that community that were being really challenged and mistreated by some of law enforcement and some by town proprietors and so forth. And so one of the things that I was really proud of to say that, to be very proactive with this kind of dynamic was to create a task force to look at that and to bring both all the parties together sooner rather than later. So it was not an assumption that someone that had tinted windows in a car should be pulled over, or that, everybody from, the community that we were serving, all the business people were not against our students. And so we're trying to break down those barriers. So I would say that bringing together that task force to work on town-gown relations directly and really quickly into understanding the situation was something that I am proud of. However, it wasn't because it had been historic and it had been long serving and the tension had been going on for years. I think people had built up a lot of resistance to wanting to communicate. And so I don't think it was very popular for people to sit in those task meetings at first.
Okay, but it sounds like you made it work.
Yes, I hope so. I hope it's still working. And one of the things that I think is really important too is to revisit that. We can say, you're bringing people together and we have some sort of understanding, and then people walk out the door and it's not implemented, or it's like, they don't really take it to heart and don't implement it. And so I think it's important to revisit it and to make sure it's still a relevant conversation and it's still a workable solution. So I'm not about one and done. I'm about let's keep the conversation and the door open to maybe there's different reasons why things need to be revisited. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Carly, you have some, in your application, you state you mentioned some roles in a community that libraries have historically played. You mentioned vehicle for democratization of information, lever for change, social justice. I'm wondering, looking forward over, say, the next 10 years, how do you see libraries maintaining that role and that function as technology changes? And we've seen a lot of changes to libraries in the last 10 years. And where do you see libraries going in the next 10 years?
So thank you for a great question. I have a niece who's 3 and was at my house for Thanksgiving and had not been in one room in my house where I have a ton of books. So I have over 2,000 books in my collection from just my studies and so forth. And she walked in and she goes, "Oh my gosh, why do you have so many books?" It was just this funny little moment. And my husband said it's because she's always connected to a device of some sort, right? She has seen so many books in one spot. So it gets me thinking about how we access and how we, provide information or provide access to information. So I think one of the things I think we need to be thinking about is not, and this also goes for higher education, not be thinking about bricks and mortar. So yes, it is a place, it is a gathering, it is a physical, and I'm not discounting the importance of a physical location or a physical presence, but I also think that we need to get outside the box and think about a different approach to sharing information and to be in different communities. I think, as I went to go get my, I think about how much malls have changed, right, since the 80s, where I used to have big hair and walk around and go to, JCPenney's or what have you. And I, think about when I've recently accessed a mall here in the Capitol. I go because I'm getting a booster shot. I'm going because my child's getting vaccinated, and I'm going because there's a new branch of the library in the mall. So I think about if I was 25 years ago thinking about how I went and experienced a retail entity, I wouldn't have expected to get vaccinated or my library book at the mall. So I think that's kind of an interesting integration. I think it's very positive to see how things are changing. I do think that as a historian, as someone who really values and I will tell you that I love a physical book, and I know that's not for everyone. So I love the fact that we have Kindle access and audiobooks and so forth. But I do think that there is a need not to lose the written word. And I feel very much like, with archives and physical inventory and so forth, I feel like we have such a digital world that I feel people are losing sight a little bit of the history and the physical aspect. So how do you balance that in the future as well? So I ruminate on that, thinking, how do we not lose a whole generation that doesn't know how to write or read cursive writing? How do we make sure that, that those historic pieces of preservation are maintained while we move into the future? I do think it needs to continue to be discussed about what a library and the role of libraries are. I often think one of the benefits too that I've seen, especially in higher education centers, is the library as a learning commons. So it's not scary to bring a cup of coffee into a library. It's not it's a place where you can be vibrant. It is, and it is a place where you can do things outside of that physical building. So I think that there's a way for us to be integrated in other entities, other institutions. Maybe it's at our homeless shelters. Maybe it's at the schools more in a different realm, in a different way. Maybe it is at correctional facilities in a different way. So I'm just thinking, how can we bring the libraries out of a brick and mortar and into communities that do not have access to those services as readily as others who maybe could drive or who could take the bus to a public or facility.
Commissioner McGee?
No.
No.
I don't have any further questions.
Commissioner Edwards, anything else?
I'm just enjoying listening.
Oh, I'm so sorry for my voice, but thank you.
No, you've got an interesting background. Hey, I would ask, when you were in New York, you were in the more rural part of New York rather than downtown New York City?
Right. It was about 6 hours from Manhattan.
Yeah. Sounds like
Yeah.
that. Where you can have real community, right?
Well, it was absolutely. So there's so if you were to look at the map of New York, and if you could find Syracuse, northeast of Syracuse, about 2 hours, just 17 miles south of the St. Lawrence River, the Canadian border, was where our community was located. So north of the Adirondacks and south of St. Lawrence, a dairy community, a very large rural community. I had, one of the best parts was so I apologize for getting a little giddy about this, but we had all of these beautiful Carnegie libraries throughout upstate New York. And it was just a joy to see how those were such anchors to the communities up in that part of the state, because in other parts they were just kind of forgotten. But upstate New York really utilized their Carnegie libraries to the fullest. But yeah, so it was a great community, very small, but also very much, it had 4 universities in that county. So it was, a lot of higher education, but also a lot of socioeconomic challenges as well.
Okay, thank you.
Carly, how familiar are you with the Timberland Regional Library Board of Trustees, and have you watched or attended any meetings or kind of know the dynamic of what's going on?
I have not watched any past. I've read through the agendas of the past few months, and I've read through kind of the terms and kind of the outlining documents, but I have not attended.
So as a follow-up, have you sat on a board of directors before?
Yes. So I am on board of trustees for Humanities Washington for the past 10 years, and I have been their development chair this past year. And then I've sat on Habitat for Humanity as a board member when I was in New York as well.
Commissioner Edwards.
What brought your interest to this point? Do you know somebody on the board or just?
I don't. No,
Right.
I am actually one of the women that I worked with in Yakima Valley College, their library system. A woman by the name of Carolyn Calhoun, she was on their board, and she was an English professor and always talked about how, she did all of the, the to work with students, and it was very, supportive of, her soul and what she wanted to do as a teacher. But she said the biggest reward for her was her board work on the library board. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And I've served on, like I said, other boards before. So when I moved to Olympia, as I have with every community I've gone to, I've become a member of, got my library card. I was trying to find my one from third grade free, by the way. I couldn't find it last night, but I still have it. But I just have been really intrigued by especially the downtown library. And so, and I think the library has a lot to offer. Everyone there that I've encountered and have been a part of and have witnessed through COVID and through interlibrary loans and through requesting books and, and bringing my children to the library, everyone I've engaged with is amazing. I don't think I could narrow it down to one person, but there are two staff members, two gentlemen that I have worked with repeatedly that I have seen through a variety of situations, from a hostile customer to someone who was having a medical emergency, and just have been really impressed with the downtown library. And so just have always wanted to be somehow more engaged in giving back. I do have a cabin out in Westport. My husband and I have taken on a little bit of a project. And so we've also been frequenting the Westport Library on a regular basis. And that is similar to my experience in upstate New York. That library in Westport is like the only thing going on, as you know, after 5 and on Saturdays during the winter. And it's tremendous. It brings in so many people. It also gives so much. So the way that there has been innovation with the Children's Museum of Olympia and doing those craft bags and things like that, trying to bring in other interest and drum up other ways to engage with the library. I've just witnessed it for the past 3.5 years. I've been very impressed and would like to figure out a way to give back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Manager, anything?
Yeah, Carly, I have a question for you. You stated that you have served in some boards in the past. During your tenure on those boards, were you exposed to reviewing and approving budgets? Give me some perspective of that process that you go through, because I believe that the Board of Trustees in this particular role will be very keen on not just providing direction to the executive director on the operational aspects of the library system, but also the financial aspects behind it.
Absolutely. So I've been on the staff side of boards also when managing budgets and so forth. So universities and the community college system all have board trustees or some sort of board directors. And so I've worked as a staff member in my role as either the dean or the vice president or the interim president, as providing and prepping materials for for board review and board consideration monthly, annually, and then also depending on audit years and things like that. So I've done it on the staff side. On the as a board member, I've participated in that on an annual basis with Humanities Washington and with Habitat for Humanity. I will say that I'm more intimately aware of and the intricacies of Humanities Washington as a state organization. Habitat for Humanity was very local chapter, so very small amounts of money we were dealing with, but Humanities Washington has a much larger portfolio. When I was in New York, I also, dealt with significant amounts of money significant amounts of different funding streams for portfolios that we would review. So when we would do some financial oversight, it would be grants, it would be philanthropic organizations we'd work with. It would be, I know you're not supposed to call them earmarks, but they're earmarks for the state government and from the national government, or from the federal government, excuse me. So I am very familiar with that as well and managing that. I also sat on the foundation board in my role as interim president at the University of New York. And so I am familiar with that, that leg of the work with the 501c3 aspect. I would also say that in my current role as the Deputy Executive Director for Education at the State Board for Community Technical Colleges, that I work closely with the executive director and my counterpart, the deputy for financial services, on making sure that we know what our allocation is, how we're presenting the allocation, how it works with the colleges, and so forth. So I'm very much tied into to that process here.
All right.
That's it.
I think we're good. Carly, it was great talking to you and getting to know you a little bit.
Thank
So
you very
nice.
much.
Thank you.
So nice to meet all four of you. Thank you for the time and thank you for the invitation. I look forward to hearing from you.
All right, thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye. Ready for the next person?
Are they in the waiting room as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary Beth Harrington.
Yep. Good morning, Ms. Harrington. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me as well?
Yep,
Very
that's
well.
good. Real quick, I'll introduce kind of who's in the room and warn you that we're being recorded, live streamed. It's kind of our COVID-19 open public meeting protocol for the board. So my name is Ty Menser. I'm the chair. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards, the vice chair of the board. To my right is Commissioner Carolina Mejia. We're the Board of County Commissioners, and then Ramiro Chavez is our county manager. So we'll have about 25 minutes or so to just kind of get to know you a little bit. And let's see, what else need to say? Anything else? The preamble? Okay, we'll just get right to it. So I'll start, and I'd just like to throw out the obvious question of why you want to serve as a Board of Trustee member for the Timberland Regional Library.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for this opportunity to interview with you. I will tell you that as soon as I found out that there was an opening on the board, I completed the application in the next day. I was so excited about this opportunity. I have, as you will see on my application, I've worked quite extensively with libraries. Some of my information, my background, I didn't even include, like working with the San Antonio Public Library and the Fort Worth Public Libraries. And specifically in those cases, while I did work with the libraries and other reasons, I did work with those boards. So I know what it's like to be a board of trustees for the library. And I know the kind of work that's involved, and I'm really excited about the opportunity. I have been looking since we moved here in February of 2020, which was a week before the lockdown. I've been looking for some way to get actively engaged with the community. And when this came up, it just seemed like the perfect fit.
All right.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you, Mary Beth. I have a question for you in regards to, can you give us an example of on a time or how you've navigated a difficult situation or a high conflict situation?
Okay, well, all right, and I'll actually, if I may, I'll use a reference from the board. I was responsible for conducting and coordinating and facilitating a board retreat for the Fort Worth Public Libraries Board. And that was planned months in advance. Everything was already set out and planned. And the library had just opened their new building in downtown Fort Worth, probably a month before the meeting. And a week before the meeting, a devastating tornado ripped through Fort Worth and severely damaging the building. And so the meeting still had to go on because of the timing and the other requirements, we had to have that meeting. And we also had to have the meeting to discuss what was going to be done. And there was a lot of contention, and there was a lot of conflict, and there was a lot of anger and grief in the room. And so I had to facilitate it. And when I facilitate sessions like that, it's really important for me that I hear from all points of view, and not everybody wants to speak out. So it's important to recognize ways that you have discussions with people or gather information from them, even when they don't want to necessarily speak out in front of everybody. So that is definitely one situation where it was quite volatile.
Thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned that you came here right about the time the pandemic started. And
Yeah.
where did you come from, basically? Is that out of Texas? And what
Texas.
brought you here?
Well, I had been working in the North and Pacific Northwest any opportunity I had. I am a nonprofit consultant. And so I have been coming up here to speak at conferences and do presentations and work with nonprofits here for quite some time. And I absolutely love this area. And honestly, my parents had passed away, and my husband was looking for a change. And he said, "Where do you want to go in the world? We can go anywhere you want. Just pick a place." And I picked here. And now I did require that he get a job. He was retired from the Dallas Independent School District, and so now he's teaching at Olympia Regional Learning Academy here in Olympia, and so he did get a job there, and that's kind of what brought us to this particular Thurston County area.
Thank you.
Sure.
Where do you see libraries going, say, in the next 10 years as they navigate technological change and all the other factors that are kind of changing our world and changing libraries?
Right. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so I have worked quite extensively with the American Library Association, and I'm very close with the Texas Library Association. Haven't made a connection with the Washington State Library yet here, but I'm really familiar, and basically if you go outside the library world, there seems to be a lot of times people say, well, we don't need libraries anymore, right? Because we got Google, so we don't need a librarian to do reference. And we have Audible, and we have Amazon, so we don't need to buy books anymore, or borrow books from the library. And I don't find that the case. In fact, if you go to the history of libraries, at every time there's been a technological advance, everybody said, well, libraries are going to die now. And that's never been the case, because libraries evolve, and they evolve to meet the needs of the community. And so where do I see libraries going is where the community says libraries need to go. I have worked with libraries that I know that the Timberland has a library in the mall, and I've been there, and I know of other libraries that are in malls. I've seen the Dallas Public Library had a library at Dallas Love Field at the airport, or a branch, I should say. I've seen libraries that connect to schools so that they are better able to support each other. I've seen libraries as community centers. And if you want me to really nail down to one, I really see libraries becoming more community centers. Centers where people come for information. Sometimes libraries have served as evacuation points. And so basically, I think it's important to visit with the community, do a community needs assessment, and assess what the community needs, and then let the library adapt to that. That may not be answering your question, but I'm not really good at being a predictor of the future.
Understood. Anything more?
Do you currently know anybody involved in our library system, or do you have connections, family, or anything like that?
No family or anybody like that. I did have a Zoom meeting with Cheryl about a year ago, the executive director, just to introduce myself and say that I was available if there's anything she could think of me thing for me to do. My daughter, our daughter is a librarian. She actually is a librarian at a British boarding school in China. So think of Hogwarts in China. She is the director of library services. And at the time, she had gotten caught here because of the pandemic. She couldn't go back. It was about a year before. And so I was also kind of seeing if Cheryl might have something for my daughter to do too. But no, I do not, other than knowing, visiting with Cheryl, and that was just once, I do not know anybody. I've gone to the libraries, but I don't know anybody really personally from any of the libraries. I've been to many of the libraries though, because we do enjoy traveling around to all the different counties around here.
Okay, thank you.
How, either from Cheryl or attending a meeting or some other means, do you have any familiarity with the TRL Board of Trustees? Watched a meeting or kind of know any of the dynamics that they're facing?
I've been reading the papers, and I keep up with some of that. I have not done a lot of research. I mean, I did research, I read all the Board of Trustees requirements and what's been going on with that. But, I forgot. I do know, excuse me, I just remembered. I do know Nicolette Oliver, I think. She works with my husband at Orla, but I just see her when they have choir practice on Friday afternoons. So I haven't really talked to her much about the board. So I understand that there has been some challenges, but honestly, every single library that I've been involved in has had challenges. When I was with Dallas, we had to go through a reorganization where every staff person, and there was over 600, had to be reevaluated and determine whether they would stay or go, and if they would change to a position. I want to say, I don't know if you'll ask this, is that a lot of people come, and I'm not suggesting this with this Board of Trustees, but a lot of people come to this position because they just love books and they love the library, and all of that is wonderful. But I come from a business practical standpoint from the libraries. I've worked in the back end of the library. I understand the types of challenging decisions the library has to make. I was there when Dallas Public Library decided to cut half of their managers. And so you had a manager who was covering actually 2 branches. I was there when the Fort Worth Public Library had to close several branches just because they could not keep them open. So I understand from a business practical standpoint the challenges that come from having to be in this position. Did I answer your question? I hope so.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Mary Beth, I think you touched a little bit on my question related to budgets. As we know, revenues for the most part don't keep up with expenditures. Just the sheer nature of inflation put us on that always the catch up type of situation. And following up to Commissioner Mintzer's question related to the future of the library system as a whole, considering the evolution of the electronics per se, and how the lack of revenues, my words, will not be able to give you all the avenues in terms of providing direction on the operational aspects of the library. How do you balance those two?
Well, first thing is that there's a lot of revenue streams that may or may not be under consideration, or that you could consider in a library. Obviously, a lot of your revenue majority of the revenue, and what most people think about, is the revenue that comes from taxes. And yes, again, in Texas, the voters vote for fire and police and nothing else. So tax bond elections and things like that can be quite challenging, and that comes from that perspective. But and here actually I find that most people are more appreciative, let's say, of libraries, which is part of the reason I really enjoy it here. But I think that first of all, you have to look at all potential new revenue streams. You have to be very open to new revenue streams. You also have to work efficiently and effectively. And sometimes that does mean looking at staff and looking at how just, and there was a book that was at the American Library Association years and years ago called something makes the best burgers. I'm sorry, I can't remember the word, but the whole point of it is sacred cows. That's it. Sacred cows make the best burgers. Looking at sacred cows, I'm just going to say this as an example. For instance, you know, story times. Story times are fantastic and great and everything and we have to look at story times. I'm not saying we should get rid of story times, but I'm saying you have to look at it. You have to say, how can we do this better? How can we do this more efficiently? Could we use volunteers? I was director of volunteers for the Dallas Public Library System, and I know how effectively volunteers could be utilized. And in most cases, in a lot of places, volunteers are not effectively used. Sometimes they're just used as doing story time or doing something like that. And there's a lot of other ways of doing that. So that's the first thing you have to look at is I like to look at ways you might be able to generate new revenue. And then when you realize that you've expanded all those, then you have to also look at ways that you can make sure that the public recognizes what libraries bring. And so that they will vote for bond elections and new taxes and things like that. And then the other thing regarding technology, I've been to a lot of American Library Association conferences, and I know about the new technology out there, but I also know that sometimes some of the technology isn't necessary, or there's ways that you could partner or share technology or things like that. I was working with one library, a very small library that really wanted to have a maker space, but they couldn't afford a 3D computer, I guess, or machine. And so basically what they did is they partnered with the school district to do that. And I've done that with many other libraries and other organizations where we sit here and say, okay, you can't have this van that you really, really want. So how can we make this work if you don't have a van? Well, we could do this, this, this. And it's about being really, really creative. And that is something I really love doing, is being very creative and thinking kind of outside the box ways to get through these situations. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Any chance you could give me an example of doing the right thing even though it wasn't very popular?
Okay. Okay. That's a hard question, but let me give you an example. I don't know if it's the best example, but it's an example. At the Dallas Public Library, the administration wanted to have all the staff people wear polo shirts that said the Dallas Public Library. And that, that's wonderful, it's great and everything. And I told them that was a great idea, but I said that these polo shirts cost $30. And some of our staff, and some staff would have to buy 2 or 3, 4 shirts, sometimes 5 shirts, and they can't afford that. And I said, I really implored on the administration to think about that maybe there's a way to scholarship some people in, or to give a discount, or to find cheaper shirts or something like that. Because and honestly, it was hard because the administration really thought this was a great idea, but I really wanted them to understand that you really had to think about the economic impact for the staff. So is that an...
Yeah, that's an example. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry that, after this interview, I'm going to think of 5.
Well, that's the way it always is.
Of course.
Sure.
Follow up?
No, that's great.
Okay. So are you open to receiving training from the Timberland Regional Library about your role as a trustee and specifically about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has been an identified priority of the regional library?
Absolutely. I do trainings like that. I mean, not necessarily in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's not my area of expertise, but I do trainings for boards. That's my job. So absolutely, I believe in training. I believe all nonprofit boards should have adequate training to do their job.
Okay, I think we're good to go. We appreciate
Really?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you have something else you want to tell us, we're happy to listen.
Yeah, maybe we missed something. Did we miss something? Because we have to take a few minutes during this meeting to talk about this when it's all said and done. So
I understand.
Did we miss asking you something of great importance?
I don't know if it's of great importance, but I just wanted to say that I think I bring a unique set of skills to this position. First of all, I know about nonprofit boards. I teach that. I've been doing that for 30 years, so I get that. Second of all, I know about libraries, and again, from the back end, not just from the front end user, but from the back office. But I also, and we kind of touched on this about a little bit, is about being here, coming here at this juncture, at this time. I don't have any baggage from this community. I know that, and I think that will help me go with some of the challenges that you guys have been going through. Like I said, I read the newspapers, I understand. And so if, for instance, I am on the trustee, I'm kind of the new person. You know how you get a honeymoon period when you're the new employee? And so if people come to me with issues or challenges, I can say, well, look, I wasn't here for that. Please tell me more about it. And that's kind of my way of dealing with these conflicts and situations is most of the time people just want you to hear them and listen. And so I want to hear what people have to say and not make any rash judgments. And so I think that one of the other aspects that I bring to this is my objectivity and my new ideas, potentially new ideas. I also know that new ideas, you can't just shoot out new ideas and be upset when they're not accepted, because there's a lot of history here that I need to learn. We have immersed ourselves in this community in terms of learning about it. We travel around, we pick an area to go to every single weekend. And so it's funny because when Rick goes back to school on Monday, a lot of times people say, so what'd you do this weekend? And he said, oh, we went to the Bear Festival in McLean. And people are looking at us like, there's a Bear Festival in McLean? Yeah, did you know about it? Or we went to the Lumberjack Festival in Shelton or something like that. So we really have immersed ourselves in the community. And so while I do not pretend to know everything about this community, that would be very difficult. I've made every effort to learn as much as I can in this past year.
Okay.
That's really all I have. And I have a public relations and marketing background besides the nonprofit.
Okay. Well,
So that's it.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great conversation. Appreciate your time. We'll
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
So lots to think about, commissioners.
Boy, I think we're pretty fortunate
Yeah.
to have such a tough decision.
I know.
I was hoping the interview was going to make it easier.
It's made it
I'm
harder.
not sure that that's the case.
Yeah.
So we'll bring this again on Tuesday morning during your boards and commission assignments, and then at that point, gives you the time to think about.
Can we discuss it here a little bit today?
Yes, you can. I just want to give you the space.
Yeah.
To think about it.
No, well, I'm not saying we need to make a decision right now. I don't know, I just think they were both great.
I think so too. I think they both bring different sets of experience, but they're so
I wish we
valuable.
had two
in it.
openings.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I wish we had to, because they're just, I was so impressed with both of them. And I was really, when I heard Carly's interview, I was like, wow, like just blew me away. And then with Mary Beth, when she just pinpointed in on the you know, I bring that business practical view of libraries. I was just like, wow. So I think, I mean, we have a hard choice. I was so impressed with both of them and so thankful that we have, I mean, such qualified candidates for this because I know they've been
I'm
struggling.
with you. I would hope when this is all said and done and we do make a selection, that we can tell both parties it was a very tough choice when we get to that point. But for the individual maybe that does not get chosen, I would sure want to make sure that they were very aware that it was a very tough choice. And would you please stay in contact and follow along with what's going on? So, because we would like to hear from you again. Unfortunately, I guess we only have one opening.
Yeah.
We don't have two by any chance. You don't know if something else coming up. Sometimes you know things that we don't know.
No, yet.
Okay, but I don't know, I just think really to try and get them to, and neither one of them having connections is kind of a good thing with me, you know.
But I think it's an interesting perspective that at least from my point of view. You have Marianne, very business driven, you know, sometimes a more straight line to get to an objective. And you have Carly, that perhaps has more of from my point of view, an acumen to have a more broader conversation with our board members, their peers. And that collaborative approach, I think, is a value to the board of trustees. You know, Mary Beth has that business and very clear, you know, and sometimes that straight line may not happen when you have many difference of opinions, when you have 5 county representatives on a board. So both have an incredible desire, I believe, to serve, and that is probably is very valuable. And Carly a little more embedded in the community. I don't know if that is not necessarily a baggage. It's just, you know, understanding more of the community. Mary Beth has taken the steps really to get to know the community, which is also a good thing.
Good. Have you talked to Cheryl about this to see if at all, not about these 2 candidates necessarily, but what's coming up on the board? How many appointments do we get? Do we have things that maybe there's going to be an expiration come up?
She usually gives me a heads up of this. She hasn't given me a heads up on that.
But I mean, just to know for our own, so you could come back to us and say, well, there is another appointment coming in 6 months. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I didn't know you were asking about that. I did ask what skills and desires would be most useful. And what I was told, and I have an email from Cheryl saying.
Yep, I have that.
Oh, yeah, you'd have that. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, strategic planning, visioning, agency budgeting, management, personnel, strong voice, active participant. Yeah, so, okay, you guys got that. So I was just hopeful that that would be kind of a way for us to, because you're right. I mean, each one has Mary Beth, her experience is probably slightly more aligned, but then Carly's got the kind of deeper connection to Washington State, and, you know, kind of the personality that may, just kind of what Romero said. I mean, and again, it's kind of like which one of those is more important. I don't know. I mean, they're both, you can make a great case for either one, I think.
Right.
So that's what I'm up against. I'd like to hear what Cheryl says. Hey, well, we've got an opening coming up in 6 months. There's a position.
Well, there's only 2 Thurston County, and I think Nicolette Oliver, who was referred to, she was appointed by us a year and a half or
Yeah,
so.
so I don't think nothing is coming up for Thurston County.
Yeah, Nicolette, I know, I've heard from Cheryl, is doing a fantastic
And
job.
I don't know how long the terms are, but.
Yeah.
I don't know either. You know, they're 3 years, 6 years, 2 years. I don't know.
So Cheryl did respond in terms of what she outlined in that email, what she's looking for, strategic planning, you know, long-term budget, a little bit of financial background. So.
Well, this Mary Beth gal, And she kind of has everything that Cheryl's looking for, you know, like you say, but the other one's got the broader contacts and everything. I mean, boy, it's a tough one. That is a tough decision.
But it's good to be in that position, really.
Yeah, but I don't want to
Having
discourage
options.
either with the one that doesn't get it, that does not get it selected. Boy, I want to encourage that person to be involved or participate or.
Maybe you know, there's, you have the application, you have the opportunity to discuss and touch base with whomever is not selected. You know, that we have many other appointments or many other different boards that you may consider.
Yeah, but there's
international.
such a good fit there.
Yeah, they're qualified
Yeah.
for this board.
Yeah,
Really, I mean, but yeah, I mean, any board, but I mean, that's the one, it's obvious why they're
Right.
excited about this, given their background. Okay, well, something to chew on.
So, we'll bring this back in just a moment.
Boy,
I think the good news is we can't mess it up too bad.
I think you're right.
And I'm glad that you have taken and gone through the due diligence.
You know, I questioned, you know, just to myself, we haven't done this before, right? But it's a good suggestion that you made. I mean, it really is. I think it was very, very beneficial to make the right choice. But now I don't know which one is the right choice.
Yeah, I know, I was worth the time, I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
Like to close the meeting, sir?
Okay. All right, so it's 11:59 and no action is going to be up at this point. This work session is closed and we're adjourned.
Was that a do for anything?